Good evening. I will now call to order the Tuesday, July 20th RTD Board meeting to order. We are convened as of 5:30 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. I would respectfully ask everyone to remain muted unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please note that the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com. And a live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. Colleagues, being elected as a member of this body imposes an ethical obligation for each of us to enhance and maintain the public confidence in this agency. As a board of directors, it is our collective duty to our constituents, stakeholders, and staff to conduct our business in an atmosphere of mutual respect, cooperation, civility, trust, and collegiality. These are the values that we can all agree upon. As such, I encourage each of us to review the operating guidelines adopted by the board and to act in accordance with those principles, which are available on the Board of Directors page on the RTD website. Thank you. Director Williams, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I'll do my best. Ladies and gentlemen, I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
the United
States of America
and
to the republic
for which it
stands
one
one nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
for all.
Ms. McManus, would you please call the roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Busick.
Here.
Director Catlin.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Deschelle.
Present.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Rosenthal.
Present.
Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Tisdale.
Present.
Director Whitmore.
Present.
Director Williams.
Good evening, I'm here. I brought my bus.
Chair Rivera Malpietti.
Present.
15 present and accounted for. We have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McManus. At RTD, safety is our core value, and I'd like to begin this meeting with a short safety briefing. While recent public health orders have relaxed requirements for the use of face coverings in certain settings, don't let your guard down too soon. As a reminder, the Transit Security Administration, the TSA, has extended the federal mask requirement for public transportation until September 13th, 2021. The federal mask requirement states that individuals must wear a face covering while waiting for and while riding public transportation, to include airports and aircraft, train stations and trains, bus stops and buses. This evening, there are no retirees, and this is now our public participation period, which is open to anyone who would like to address the board. As is our custom, we allow any of our elected officials present to speak first. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak, and if you're dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. So if you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing and you will not have the opportunity to speak this evening. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for the board, please email those materials to the board office at the following email address: board.office@rtd-denver.com. During this time, the board will not offer comments or responses. Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and speakers, please refrain from profane or obscene speech and direct your comments to the board as a whole, and refrain from personal attacks. Ms. McManus, do we have any speakers at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, my name is Rosalie Ward. I live in Brighton. I would like to address the board regarding Accessoride coming to my home. I am 1 block outside the boundaries. So for 2 years now, I have had to make arrangements to meet at multiple locations to meet your driver. I have met at Circle K. The traffic was pretty heavy there. It was hard for your driver to get turned around or to find me. I've met at a relative's home. There was unknown ETA prior to the portal. Most recently, and for about 1.5 years, I've been meeting at Comfort Dental. There was one instance where the driver left my client at the dental office. By the way, I do adult foster care. And so I have 2 clients that live with me full-time with developmental disabilities as well as physical handicaps. So the driver left the client at the dental office unattended. I was explained after the fact that it's door-to-door, not hand-to-hand service. The police were contacted and basically just kind of took her information. So if anything ever did come up again. I have 2 clients. The other day they were put on separate vans. And so I was after the fact instructed to put one in a PCA. So I am doing that now. The portals weren't working. And so, I told them there's no way I can sit there for 2 or 3 hours, which is what I was doing without a portal, to wait for a driver because nobody can offer me an ETA. Today, the driver this morning that met me to pick up my client was told that he was trespassing on private property. The police were called, and so they no longer want us to meet in that location. So we did have to find a new location. It's a church that's on 5th and Bromley. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for the drivers to get in and out of there because of the median and things like that. So moving on to my clients personally. So one of them, well, first I want to bring up the American Disabilities Act. While I am new to this and still learning, I think that kind of the general thing about that is we can't make it harder for them to, have access to transportation and different things. But right in this regard, we're referring to transportation. One of my clients, she actually went to physical therapy today, and she can only stand for a few seconds to transfer from her wheelchair to a chair. So at home, I have a Hoyer lift to help me get her into her wheelchair. But when I'm meeting somebody in the parking lot somewhere, I'm having to transfer her out in my driveway from her wheelchair into the car. And then once I get there, out of the car, back into the wheelchair, she goes on Accessoride, comes home. We got to repeat the same routine in reverse. And so it is difficult for her. There have been several occasions where she can't stand, so she sits down on the ground, and then I have to try to pick her up. Your drivers have always been helpful when they see that I'm having complications with her, or she can't get her legs to go in the car the right way, so she ends up going head first and ends up sitting in the floorboard. So I have to try to pull her out and turn her around to get her into the seat with the seatbelt. So it's been beyond difficult.
All right. Thank you, Miss Ward. Ms. McManus, do we have anyone else in the queue?
Yes, we have Lauren Hansen.
Lauren, please.
Howdy there, y'all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to talk about a couple of different things I've been thinking about over the past week or so, particularly in regards to the increase in service that we recently had for the All-Star game. Well, I think that's a fantastic thing that we did in regards to increasing service. I feel like beyond just the increases in service for the September service changes, we should just continue to keep the all-star mantra in mind and make sure that we're able to increase RTD back to pre-pandemic service levels. As someone that rides most of the lines, including the R line, which has been one of the first on the chopping blocks to be cut down when it came to service, to me, it seemed to be a bit of a smack in the face that there was temporary service increases for folks coming from out of town, and then reductions immediately once the tax dollars and revenue from people out of state were gone. So I implore you, not just think beyond like the September service changes, but also building out and also restoring 2 of our light rail lines would be something that I would be supportive of, so that we can match the all-star game with an all-star transit system in Denver. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McManus?
I see no other speakers in the queue, Chair.
Thank you.
Uh,
With no other, I'm sorry?
I see 720-210-7759, which I thought previously spoke. If I'm mistaken, I apologize. Would you please announce your name? I believe it's Rosalie Ward.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Ward spoke.
Yes,
All right.
there are no other speakers in the queue.
Thank you, ma'am. With no other participants in the queue, we will now close the public participation period at this time. Next is the committee reports. The committee minutes were included in the board packet. Are there any corrections from the directors? Hearing none, those committee reports will stand as submitted and will become part of the permanent record. Next is the general manager's oversight and performance update. Secretary Busick, if you would, please give us an update on the work at the GM Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the members of the GMOC for your hard work and participation. We will have a matter coming up later in the agenda, a recommended action regarding the general manager and CEO's contract and an amendment to that. That reflects input from the GMOC as well as the entire board. I'm sure there'll be further discussion about that as we approach that, so I'll wait until that time to address any issues that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Next is the approval of the board minutes of June 22nd, 2021, and the special board meeting minutes of June 29th, 2021. Unless there is an objection to considering these minutes at all the same time, may I please have a motion to approve the minutes for the following meetings: June 22nd board meeting and June 29th special board meeting.
I'll move, Director Williams.
Second, Director Sloan. I have a movement of Director Williams and a second of Director Sloan. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll now call for the vote. Are there any no votes to this action? Okay, seeing none, it passes with 15 votes, Ms. McManus. Next is the general, thank you. Next is our general manager's report. General Manager Johnson, please share with us your report.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening to you, board members, and to all who are virtually assembled. I am Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO of the Regional Transportation District. And this evening, as part of my General Manager's report, I will brief you on the following topics: the pandemic protocol, next steps, strategic plan update, Major League Baseball All-Star Game activities, our internal audit function, improvement, competitive solicitation, and last but not least, an accountability committee recommendation status. So first and foremost, regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra announced yesterday, Monday, July 19th, that the National Public Health Emergency Declaration would be renewed effective today, Tuesday, July 20th. The Public Health Declaration is anticipated to be renewed again on October 20th, following the current 90-day window, and may possibly be further renewed through the spring of 2022. According to data from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, immunization rates continue to decline, though between 64.5% and 82.2% of residents in the counties comprising the district have received at least one dose of the vaccination. Adams County has the lowest vaccination rate, and the city and county of Broomfield has the highest as it stands today. While vaccination rates and new infections continue to decline overall, hospitalization rates are increasing slightly across the Denver metro area and other parts of the U.S., and it remains prudent to be alert to this trend. Earlier today, I disseminated a memorandum to all employees detailing the next steps the agency will take in relationship to our pandemic protocols. Beginning August 1st, the maximum occupancy of RTD offices will increase to 50%, with eventual additional capacity increases predicated upon the decrease of the spread of COVID-19. It's important to note that all employees will continue to be required to wear a mask at all times while operating vehicles, passing through buildings, gathering in common areas, and other similar situations. Pursuant to the Transportation Safety Administration's current mask mandate, which runs through September 13th, 2021, employees and customers alike must continue to wear masks while aboard transit vehicles and while waiting at stations and bus stops and platforms. In the following months, the executive team, along with myself, will continue to review public health trends, including vaccination and infection rates, to determine whether and when the next occupancy increases will eventually take place. So I wanted to now touch upon our strategic planning efforts, and I wanted you all to know that work continues surrounding formalizing the agency's strategic plan. As you all know, this effort is a culmination of the work that the board as well as staff had put into revamping the agency's strategic planning process over the last several months, and is a glimpse of the future of the agency. As you are aware, the plan will include performance metrics for each of the agency's departments, detailing specific tactics, metrics, and objectives for all of the major functions performed by each department and functional work groups, which will result in success outcomes. The strategic plan will be distributed to the board by the end of this month in advance of a special board meeting scheduled for August 3rd for this body's consideration. It is prudent that the agency advance this initiative in order to allow ample time for the annual budget preparation process, as well as creating alignment around what our initiatives are, as it also correlates to performance of the overarching organization for each individual employee that are in various non-represented roles. And with that, recognizing that I'm requesting we advance this initiative, we will resume in earnest following the board's consideration of said strategic plan, which I noted optimally would be August 3rd. Furthermore, as you heard from one of our public commenters, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game was held in Denver just this past Tuesday, with several days of events leading up to the big game. Compared to the prior 3-week average, ridership increased on bus and rail 3.5% on Sunday, July 11th, 36% on Monday, July 12th, which was the day of the home run derby, and 20% on Tuesday, July 13th for the All-Star Game itself. I want to acknowledge my pride in reference to the agency's efforts and responsiveness and scalability to seamlessly accommodate the increased volume of all-star game participants on the system during this very busy week. And I'd be remiss not to acknowledge all of those individuals who played a part in making this a success. So kudos to all of our team members. A brief note on the internal audit function improvement. As you know, last week we discussed elements of what we are intending to do as we go forward. And I want to share, as of yesterday, Monday, July 19th, there is currently an active solicitation for interested parties with respect to providing consulting services to enhance the implementation of the internal audit work group. And the intent, as you may recall, is to identify and contract with the consultants in the coming weeks in order to continue progress toward full implementation of the Office of the State Auditor and the peer review panel, which was assembled by the American Public Transportation Association upon my request to the President and CEO of APTA. Last but not least, I'd like to touch upon the Accountability Committee final report, which includes recommendations. As of 2:01 p.m. today, being Tuesday, July 20th, I did receive via electronic communication the final report. And so with that being said, RTD is currently in receipt. Therefore, the 45-day window for RTD's responses to the committee's recommendation begins, as I stated today, and will end on Friday, September 3rd. Staff has prepared responses, which I have personally read through in addition to members that have compiled those based on the Accountability Committee's draft report, which was discussed during the final formal meeting of the Accountability Committee on July 12th. The plan that I have outlined going forward is for staff to review the final report and discern what changes, if any, have been made to the final document. The week of July 26th, it is my intent to meet with Directors Geisinger and Whitmore, who served as ex officio members on the Accountability Committee, to review the timeline for response and board engagement. It is also my intent to garner board's feedback by providing staff's response for review and comment a minimum of 1 week prior to a public board session. Those responses will be compiled and shared with the board for consideration and adoption, most likely at the August 24th board meeting. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, General Manager. Are there any questions for the General Manager? Seeing none, thank you. Next is our public hearing on the amendment to the 2021 adopted budget. Ladies and gentlemen, the chair hereby calls to order the public hearing on the Regional Transportation District's amendment to the adopted budget for the year 2021. In accordance with both RTD's requirements and local government statutes, notice of the public hearing was duly posted in the office of the Executive Manager to the Board of Directors. The notice was published in 2 major daily newspapers of the district prior to this meeting and on our RTD website. This public hearing will be conducted under the rules and regulations for public hearings adopted by the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation District, and a copy of those rules will be part of the record of this hearing. The chair would like to point out that the testimony will be limited to the subject of the public hearing, and presentations of the testimony should be no longer than 3 minutes. Written testimony should be presented to Barbara McManus, Executive Manager to the Board of Directors, for distribution to the board. The amendment to the 2021 adopted budget was included in the electronic packet for the board and the public to review. Are there any participants who would like to speak on this? Ms. McManus, I'll ask you to help me see if there is anyone.
I currently see no hands up for comments.
Okay. With no participants in the queue, we will close the public hearing for the 2021 amended budget at this time. Do we have a motion to accept the amended budget?
So moved, Director Davidson.
Second, Shelley Cook.
I have a movement of Director Davidson and a second of Director Cook. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll now call for the vote. Are there any no votes on this action? Seeing none, I'm counting 15 A votes and 0 no votes with Director Davidson and Director Cook moving and seconding it. So that passes. Okay, this evening under unanimous consent, there are 4 items on the agenda, on the consent agenda. They're listed under item 12 as actions B through E, and they are the internal audit function charter, the September 2021 service change proposal, service equity analysis, incorporation of the land acknowledgement during monthly board meetings, and the September 2021 proposed service change. If anyone has a change to or questions on one of these items, please feel free to advise the chair at this time, and we will of course be happy to pull it from the unanimous consent agenda for consideration under a recommended action. Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Director Davidson.
Second, Bob Broom.
I heard Director Davidson is the movant and Director Broom is the second. Is there any no votes? Seeing none, I'm counting 15 A's, 0 no's, with Director Davidson as the movant and Director Broom as the second. Okay, recommended action. There is one recommended action on the agenda tonight listed as item 13 action F. That recommended action is for the Board of Directors to adopt the third amendment to the CEO and GM employment agreement to establish the annual performance appraisal and incentive compensation program for the General Manager and CEO, Deborah A. Johnson, as set forth in the proposed amendment. Do we have a motion?
Busick, so moved.
Second, Director Catlin.
I have an amendment.
Okay. First, let me say I heard Director Busick and then Director Catlin. Discussion, please. Director Williams.
Yes, I'd like to amend. I move to substitute for the proposed third amendment the portions of the red lined amendments circulated by staff to the board that provide for 2022, Ms. Johnson will be eligible for up to a 6% base salary adjustment.
I second that amendment.
I heard. Okay, thank you. I have Director Williams moving that forward with Director Bouquet seconding it. Is there any discussion on this item? Director Deschel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am opposed to this amendment as written. The red line that was circulated by staff indicates a slice from 15% to 6%. And frankly, I just think it's a little too sharp of a decrease, recognizing there's other pieces at play here. While 15% may have been an arbitrary choice, I think 6% is just as arbitrary. And so for me to make that price cut, to make that compensation cut, when we continue to say this is one of the best general managers and CEOs we've had, we wouldn't be here without our general manager and CEO, to then cut the incentive-based compensation by over 50% just isn't aligned for me. So that is why I will be a no on this amendment.
Thank you. Director Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to note that the 15% that's referenced was an up to statement was made up to 15%, and that it was put into the previous documents as a benchmark, and that it allowed for any place from 0 to 15%. And so, and I'd also like to note that this is not for the rest of eternity, that it's until we get some other work done. And Ms. Johnson has been here long enough to have some more criteria. And that's why I brought this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Director Geisinger.
Sure. I think Deborah Johnson is working very hard. I think she's doing a great job, and I want her to feel well compensated. I can mention several things: the internal audit work, the accountability committee work, the safety and security, the peer reviews, a number of other issues. I suggested, I didn't pick the 6%, but I did suggest that we need to do a compensation analysis before we move forward in, I believe that a 6% is a good step with our first year performance review. It's a reasonably subjective performance review. And I think the goal is just to get the compensation analysis done and then make decisions based on data. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lewis.
Sorry, having trouble with my tech today. I would also be opposed to this amendment. I do appreciate you all putting it forward, but I would really like to see us base some of these things off of a methodology and really, one, address the problem that we're hoping to solve here. We had a very robust conversation about the 2010 audit report. We had a discussion about what factors would be included as we were discussing the general manager's compensation. And so I would prefer that we continue to align in that way. I will just make note that we've talked quite a bit recently, as of late, about the 2010 audit. About the 2010 audit, we've also talked about the strategic planning that General Manager Johnson has been responsible for in getting us to this point where we are able to have the peer reviews, where we are really digging in deep into the issues that exist within the agency and are finding some resolve and some resolution around those things. And so I do think that she's on the right track, and I just do not think this sends the best message. I've heard some concerns that folks have been a bit concerned about what this may say to our constituents. And I think it shows that we believe in our general manager, that we made the right hire, and that we trust in her leadership. And so I appreciate you, Director Williams, for moving this forward, as well as you, Director Bouquet. And I cannot support the amendment. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you're speaking, we're not hearing.
I guess I was muted. Director Catlin.
Madam Chair, I did lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to speak to some of the earlier comments. I think everyone on this board and we all support, at least if I can speak for all of us, if that's okay, our general manager, and I don't think anybody's really detracting from that. I think what I think we're kind of speaking to now is numbers, and it's very difficult to really match up the numbers with how well she's doing, because as mentioned earlier by Director Geisinger, if we don't really have the metrics that we need in order to judge that, it's hard to know what percentage to have. It's hard to know how to gauge against that percentage. And so I think that's why it's so important to do this study. It's also important to have more metrics. It's important to have more time in order to ascertain how well she's doing. Personally, and again, I think all of us thank her for her work, and we all know this agency has endured, a terrible affliction of, of the virus, really, causing so much of our ridership to not ride and many other things. So, she's really had to struggle, and not just her, but her leadership team, which she has a very strong hand in selecting, leading. So to wrap that all up, it is difficult to choose a number. Arguably it should be higher, but then some could argue it should be lower, and some are saying it's 6%. But I think 6% is a good number. It is also higher than inflation, and I think it is justifiable at this time.
Thank you. Director Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would concur with the comments just made by Director Rosenthal and originally made by Director Williams as well. I do believe, and others who have spoken in support, I do believe that the adjustment to a 6% number in the written contract in no way, shape, or form betokens any kind of assessment of the general manager other than a good one, other than a positive one, other than an encouraging one. And I believe that the number is something that we can, with head held high, speak to all of our constituents and justify, and that the benefit of what we anticipate may be a further amendment to this motion, to the main motion, will be further buttressed by a compensation analysis to be performed. So I do support the amendment, and I thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Director Cook.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I agree with many of the comments that people who are in favor of this have brought up in terms of our regard for CEO and DM Johnson, about the need to bring in numbers. And in fact, I think this, in combination with the next amendment, reinforces or buttresses, adds to the methodology that we've talked about needing. So I really appreciate the work that you all did. You, Chair Rivera Malpiedi, and Chair Busick, working with other board members and with CEO GM Johnson to get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Director Bouquet.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple reasons why I did second this amendment. The first being is we're very early into the process. We haven't actually had a study for compensation yet. And so that's why I think that is appropriate for it. I do also want to kind of echo what Director Tisdale said. This is not at all a critique of GM CEO Johnson. This is, I think far from it. I think also I would like to put, publicly, I don't want to speak for GM Johnson. This 6% is a number I believe that she is comfortable with going forward. And I think that's the big goal for her and us as an agency, is to go forward as an agency and to understand what is the proper compensation. And then from there, of course, once the study has gone forth, we can look back at it. This is not permanent. But again, this, from my understanding, is a number that the chair of the GMOC is comfortable with, the chair of this board is comfortable with, and the GM is comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments by board members? Seeing none, I will now call for the vote. Are there?
Has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Director Tisdale had his hand up.
Oh. Director Tisdale, is your hand still up? You're muted, sir.
And with apologies, my hand was left dangling unintentionally.
Gotcha, thank you. Okay. Are there any no votes on the motion? Director Bouquet, I'll just go through the list. Director Bouquet?
I'm a yes to the amendment.
Director Broom?
Yes.
Director Busick?
Yes.
Director Catlin,
Yes.
Director Cook,
Yes.
Director Davidson,
Yes.
Director Deschel,
No.
Director Geisinger,
Yes.
Director Lewis.
My hand was up. I'm a no, but I wanted to just state for the sake of the record that our general manager expressed that she was comfortable with this because she's pretty much worn out of this process. Not because, so I just wanted just to like state that for the record, just to clarify her position there.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Director Rosenthal.
I am a yes as well, and as I recall hearing the general manager, if I can also, I thought I heard her say, it's like, look, this is really our decision, and it's up to us, and so we are really the decision makers on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sloan. Yes. Director Tisdale.
Yes.
Director Whitmore.
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
I have 13 yeses and 2 noes. The motion passes. There's a second amendment.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
I move to substitute for the proposed third amendment the portions of the redlined amendment circulated by staff to the board that provide that the board will engage a third party by competitive solicitation to conduct a compensation analysis that will be used to determine the percentage compensation increase for which Ms. Johnson will be eligible for the performance periods beginning January 1st, 2023.
Second, Tisdale.
All right, I have a movement of Director Deschel and a second by Director Tisdale. Is there any discussion on this motion? Director Davidson.
I believe Director Lewis was ahead of me in the queue.
Oh, okay. Mike, I'm sorry. I'm having technical difficulties.
That's
Director
fine. Go ahead,
Lewis.
Director Davidson.
Okay, thank you. I just want to state, I think this is a good amendment. I'm a little surprised that we don't have the data for this. I think we need to get the data for this. I think it's completely clear we have a very strong CEO. We're facing a whole litany of problems right now as an organization. I think we all intend, certainly I intend, for RTD to be one of the leading, if not the leading agencies in the country. So I would expect that we would compensate the leaders that we select accordingly. I would expect that we are very competitive, but I think we need to have some methodology here. So I appreciate the amendment. I appreciate that very much. I look forward to the results. The faster we can do that, the better. And then I think we move out with an eye towards being the most competitive in the country. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Director Kaplan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I couldn't have said it better myself, Director Davidson. I completely support this general manager and really want to be able to back up whatever increases we give going forward in the future with solid data. And I think what we have placed going forward next year to start evaluating based on our success outcomes is really, really good. It's just this first step, and the compensation study that we need to get done as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you. And just to echo what Director Catlin and others have been saying. So first of all, a supportive word for our general manager and the work that her and the team and of course all the employees of RTD have been doing. But and I'm so first of all, I think it's right and proper that she is compensated more than, as I understand it, from the previous general managers. And I think that, my sense is that, when this study is done, my hope is that it will be recognized that, her work should be compensated more, and then we can look at that after the study is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate Director Deschel bringing this forward. I think it's really important. I just like to say for the state of the record that historically women have been underpaid in terms of compensation. So this is a great time for us to be having this discussion and get really in line with what the market reflects in terms of her experience as a leader. I would say also historically, Black women have been historically underpaid in terms of their compensation. And I would not be surprised if that after we completed this audit, that's exactly what we learn. And so thank you so much, Director Deschelle, for bringing this forward, as I think it's timely and incredibly important. And I appreciate you, Director Davison, for bringing forth the opportunity for us to have some methodologies, because the subjective is really killing us.
Thank you. Director Williams, or I'm sorry, Director Busick first and then Director Williams.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I want to thank everybody for the good discussion we've had and the discussion on the last one. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. The mere fact that we disagree on some things does not make us dysfunctional. It means we're functioning appropriately. And if we all agreed on everything, we'd only need one of us. So I appreciate the discussion, and we're going to disagree on some things from time to time, but that's a good thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Director Deschelle for this. And I want to point out that I think that everybody on this board thinks that Deborah Johnson is doing a phenomenal job. We think that we're cool because we hired her. We hired her because we thought she was good before she got here. She's done nothing but prove us right since day one, and we anticipate that she will continue to do so. We are just having a healthy discussion about what her compensation is, and it is always open at any time to adjustment. So I'm taking the optimistic outlook that we'll be reasonable to begin with, and as we all move forward, we will probably be giving her a ride on Bezos's spaceship to compensate her for the things that she has done for this agency. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Williams. That'll be some spaceship, I think. All right, any other directors? Director Deschelle.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for giving me lots of credit for this wonderful idea. I do just want to make sure that, for the record, while Director Busick and I don't often agree, this was one area where we did agree, and there were many others who were a part of this conversation, including all the members of the GMOC, where we had this discussion about the need to have this compensation analysis carried out. So I do not want to take sole credit for this. There were many others behind the scenes.
Thank you. Director Williams, your hand is still up. Okay, thank you so much. All right, I would just like to say thank you to this board of directors for being so engaged in a thoughtful process, looking at our general manager, who I think is the most stellar leader I have worked with in decades, hands down. And I am just so honored to have her leading this agency. I think the proof is in the pudding. She has hit the ground running and has done stellar work. So thank you, General Manager. Director Cook, I see your hand. Oh, you're muted.
Just to clarify, we're voting on this amendment only, and we will then be able to discuss the main motion. Is that correct, Chair?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other discussion, I'll now call for the votes. And what I'm going to do again is go through the list just so I'm absolutely sure I've got everybody's voice at the table. So hope you could bear with me 1 second. Okay. Director Bouquet.
Yes.
Director Broom.
Yes.
Director Busick.
Yes.
Director Catlin.
Yes.
Director Cook.
Yes.
Director Davidson.
Yes.
Director Deschelle.
Yes.
Director Geisinger.
Yes.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Rosenthal.
Yes.
Director Sloan. Yes. Director Tisdale.
Yes.
Director Whitmore.
Yes.
Director Williams.
I'd like to make it unanimous.
Oh,
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So yes, 15 ayes, this passes unanimously. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now I need to go back to the main motion. All right. The main motion is for the Board of Directors to adopt a third amendment to the CEO and GM employment agreement to establish the annual performance appraisal and incentive compensation program for the General Manager and CEO, Deborah A. Johnson, is set forth in the proposed amendment. Do we have a motion?
So moved as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second is amended.
Oh, okay. I have Music and Catlin. Is there any discussion on this item? Director Cook?
Yeah, thank you. I had a couple of questions, actually. So I did listen to the GMOC meeting, and the first question is, I had kind of assumed that we would have a chance to look at the baseline data before committing dollar amounts in subsequent years. So I'm talking about the second period in particular. Can you all say why it's important, without knowing what our baseline will be and how likely a 5% increase, for example, will be? What's the reasoning behind putting in place the 2023 and beyond at this point, since we don't know what that data is going to be like? Or if you want, I can just state that as a concern. I don't know if there seems to be a fatigue about any of the amendments, but if I had my druthers, we would approve the current year and then wait to develop the particulars, improved as they are with the amendments, until we know what the net promoter score or the community value score looks like at a baseline, since we're doing those brand new. So that's what my one question or comment would be.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Director Deschel.
Speaking only for myself as someone who's also on the GMOC, my understanding of the idea of charting out the more than just this year, I have two comments. This is the first one. More than just this year is not only are we up against a deadline, but we want to chart out a path so that we don't end up over a 5-year contract with on the 10th amendment or something to that effect, and continuing to amend the contract, and the need to sort of set the rules of the game and allow everyone to play by that. The reality is we as a board have incredible leverage in making these amendments. And so my understanding of why we are doing beyond just the current year is to really set the stage. And while we can adjust, there are ways we can adjust, but we wanted to make sure the contract was whole, so to speak, for the entirety of the general manager's tenure. So, and my second comment is just if council could confirm that the 6% that was amended, do we also need to amend Exhibit B, or was that included in the amendment?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
Yes, thank you, Director Deschel. That was included in the amendment.
That is all.
And Madam Chair, if I can just a clarification to Director Cole's question that she's asking. As Director Deschel was saying, the way the agreement is drafted, it does provide some flexibility for the board in future years to set and adjust the success outcomes that are set in the strategic plan. So it does envision that would be reviewed every year. So it's not that those are being fixed as the strategic plan is currently being discussed. It's just the framework that's being fixed.
And to follow up, Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
So does that mean, for example, the 5% increase that then feeds into part of the compensation pot, that also could be modified, or is that only a Director or CEO GM Johnson's suggestion, or how much flexibility do we have there?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
So I'm not sure, Director Cook, what you're referring to with respect to the 5% increase as amended, as was discussed for the first year. So going into 2022, based on the 2021 appraisal, there would be a 6% increase to Ms. Johnson's base salary. And then beginning in 2023, you would use the strategic plan, and you would also use the compensation analysis. And that would provide the board with the basis for the potential increase, the potential percentage that would be in play. So the board would set that based on the compensation analysis, and would also set the allocation between base and incentive pay going forward as well.
Right. And so if I may, the incentive payment in part, if I recall from the GMOC video, included incentive pay when our CEO attained a 5% increase in net promoter score in one area, for example. It wasn't, it was broken down by category. So the question is, if that 5% proves unrealistic or too easy or needs adjusting, do we have within this framework the ability to adjust that in subsequent years?
Yes. Yes.
So the strategic plan, of course, you haven't adopted quite yet, and I think that's the 5% you're referring to when we're talking about the net promoter score. So that is still going to be adopted. Once the board adopts it, that would be set for the year going into 2022. At the end of 2022, if you wanted to adjust that, then you certainly could going forward.
Okay, so it's going to be determined by the strategic plan. It's not been determined by our last retreat where that was what was shown as the outcome, correct? The 5% increase as the goal. And I appreciate you.
And I'll defer to GM and CEO Johnson about the discussion with the 5%, but that again was in discussions with respect to some of the metrics that might be formalized in the strategic plan. That's not what's memorialized in the contract. The contract provides some flexibility for whatever it is the board adopts ultimately as the metrics.
Okay, and Madam Chair, could I impose one more question? Forgive me for being for hogging the time here. The other question and issue is, as I understand it, our consultant who developed the framework is also going to be doing the actual surveys and generating the data upon which this is based. And I'm thinking that for credibility's sake, it would be better if the board itself had more oversight over the data that feeds into the general manager's, the part of the framework that feeds into the general manager's compensation, rather than it being generated by a consultant of the agency that there's no connection to. Is there a way to have is there willingness on your part, Deborah Johnson, to include the GMOC at minimum in some of how that data is reviewed and generated? Some of the discretionary items, for example, on community value, where we don't know yet what that indicator is going to look like. We don't know exactly what they'll include or not include in there. Would you be willing to have the GMOC engage on those pieces insofar as they impact your compensation, that element of review by the board?
So I'm not certain if I understand the question of which you're posing, Director Cook, because when we talk about a net promoter score, all of that data is going to be verified by a third party. What was stated was that our current consultant could do it, but as was stated before, you all have the auspices to decide what that may be going forward. So I'm not certain if I'm understanding the question of what you're posing.
Okay, looked like from the scope of work that changed to the scope of work that Transpo will be generating the surveys that feed into those different categories. And if that was simply as your performance tool, I would just be, really incredibly impressed. But now that will also become the framework for deciding your compensation. The question is, can the board be a little bit more present in that part, in the part about how the indicators are established for community value, for example, just so that the board, and not just the consultant you've retained, that the board has some influence over those metrics that feed into your compensation evaluation.
Thank you very much, Director Cook. So keeping in mind that there's going to be performance metrics and key performance indicators, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but as we look at those metrics relative to what feed into the success outcomes, I don't necessarily know if you guys have the acumen to determine what the mean distance between failures should be. So those are the different elements that will feed in to discern how we achieve the success outcomes that we would leverage going forward. And I'm amenable to having a discussion around this, but I do think it's premature having this conversation and ambiguity when you have yet to see the final draft strategic plan that incorporates all the hard work the men and women of this organization have put into in reference to the departmental and functional areas that feed into what we should be doing collectively to help us achieve the outcomes as prescribed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Director Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually wanted to respond to Director Cook's comment earlier, or question earlier. It's my understanding, Director Cook, that this is that's not how you typically draft contracts, and at least it's been my experience on the board that we typically don't have contracts, employment contracts at least, that are year over year, that you typically have them for a certain amount of time. And that's also been my experience with the contracts that come before us for the purchasing of buses or allocation to infrastructure investment, et cetera, et cetera. That has been my experience, Director Cook. And so I'm not sure, or that was actually my understanding as we were having a discussion during the GMOC. And that's the reason why we decided to not do a month to month, if you will, contract for our CEO.
You're on mute, Madam Chair.
I don't know why I keep getting muted. Director Tisdale, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to come back to a comment that was made by Director Cook earlier, and there was reference to 5% in the contract. If I am correct, and I could be totally misunderstanding the question, for which I apologize in advance, but the last sentence of section 2 of the proposed agreement addresses 25%. It says if RTD, excuse me, exceeds the strategic plan success outcomes and goals by 25%, Ms. Johnson shall receive an additional 2% over performance goal incentive payment. I don't know if that's the section that Director Cook was referring to, but that's the only other section in the contract that I read that addresses something with the number 5 in it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Director Catlin.
Thank you. Also, with respect to Director Cook's concern about the board not being involved, these questionnaires that come up with the promoter scores, they're developed by professionals. But I wanted to say that we had a discussion, I believe either in our strategic planning workshop or in the GMOC, that in fact the chair of the board and the chair of the GMOC would have input into this process and communicate with the board and GMOC, and also would be involved in the results when they came in and then communicating them with the general manager. So I think we will have board involvement, Director Cook. That was my understanding, although I do agree with GM CEO Johnson that we as a board do not have the expertise to properly structure such a questionnaire to develop some of those outcomes and in the community values and those types of things. So I just think that we have enough checks and balances in place as we have it structured currently.
All right, thank you. Director Cook, you want a second bite at the apple? Oh, you're muted, ma'am.
Yes, if you'll allow me, and I really apologize to everybody. So we at the retreat had, I think, adopted or agreed to goals for each of the 4 areas. And So I'm carrying forward the assumption that those success outcomes and the goals associated with them are what are being integrated into the compensation discussion. And so the one goal was 5%. And I'm just concerned, we don't know what the baseline is yet. I want to make sure we'll have a chance. And B, if this was purely a management tool, I would say absolutely, that's all General Manager CEO Johnson's bailiwick. But once it's doubling or also being aligned with the compensation structure, then to be completely hands off because some elements may, a net promoter score, not having any ability to up the target, for example, the 5%, or at least I'm not yet sure that we'll have that ability, or to say the community value score isn't quite hitting what we see as important in that area. I mean, since that compensation and the performance evaluation really is the board's job, I just want to make sure we're not being overly constrained in how we gather the data. So that's just where I'm coming from, and I'll stop with that, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Director Lewis.
I really appreciate Director Cook's comments. Director Cook, I'm curious as to what you would put on the table as a resolution. Like how would we resolve those concerns?
Director Cook.
Okay. It would be that the board would, with staff, exert some oversight into the data gathering that relates to the performance pieces that cause the bump in compensation. So not not those purely technical elements that are part of her managing her performance in her organization and driving that excellence, but more those particular pieces that relate to our compensation decisions. And having the board more engaged on that, I think would be appropriate and make the process more defensible. So.
Director Lewis, does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm not sure that I understand, but I do hear the concern. I'm just not sure that I understand what it means for the board to provide oversight. And so I'm curious as that, because I'd hate for the concerns to just kind of be in the wind and we ignore it and keep moving forward.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Please.
Maybe if Transpo isn't alone and in coordination with our staff, generating the numbers that I don't know, if it was up to me, we would not have them doing the whole ball of wax here. Not have them not only setting up the framework, but also generating the data and then providing to us the numbers that we then take and move into the evaluation piece. I would prefer if there was a way that somebody could if they could engage with the GMOC in the same way that we engaged with Greg Mosier, for example, I would be a little bit, I would feel a lot better in that case. And, it's something that we could take up going forward. I just was testing whether there was interest in doing that.
Director Busick.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think I understand where Director Cook's coming from, and I think it has to do with probably a lot to do with the survey analysis to set those baseline numbers and so forth. And what are the questions that we're asking the community, our writers and the community at large? And I think we're a pretty high performing board. So if Transpro wants to develop, if they're the ones doing the surveying, and I understand Director Cook that maybe it should be somebody else, but let's just assume for the sake of argument, Transpro is doing the surveying. Yeah, I would like the questions to be run by the GMOC, just to take a look at so we can see what's being done. I mean, even if we say, yeah, it looks great, at least we know what's being put out there. And I doubt they're going to, I hope they wouldn't do anything that just be, dumb and say, ask two questions and then you've got a survey. But it might be nice to have Transpo run that by the GMOC, have the GMOC look at it, because it is tied to compensation, not just evaluation. And that's something the board needs to kind of weigh in on. We could be the GMOC could be the filter for that. So There you go.
Director Lewis, your hand is still up.
Because my brain is still confused, but I will put my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Director Deschel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Director Cook, I share your concern, and Director Busick, I would love to maybe add this to August's GMOC agenda as a suggestion to spare everyone some extra time. I know we've all been on here since 4 p.m. But I would push back on, I think the GMOC should be involved, but I also want to recognize that if we're seeking a statistically valid survey, I personally am not a statistician. To my knowledge, I don't know if we have any statisticians on the board. So I think the GMOC input is important because it is tied to compensation. I actually think it may be more appropriate to find a independent statistician to either draft the survey questions or to validate or analyze the what's prepared by TransPro, right? I can see the importance of linking the person who made the metric to the survey to make sure we're accomplishing what we need to accomplish. But I also think it's important that that is validated by a third party who is a statistician or is similarly trained on statistical validity.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should bring that up to the next GMOC. And Director Cook, I hope you can come.
CEO, General Manager.
Yes, thank you very much, Director Deschel, for your comment. And I think there is confusion, and I'm glad that you made the statement you did, because from the outset, it always was stated that we'd have a third party validate whatever the survey results were. So now I understand where Director Cook is going, but it was never assumed that we would have TransPro here for an indefinite period of time, being in lockstep with the agency trying to do surveys. It was to establish the baseline so we'd understanding which direction we were going in. And then it was incorporated in and basically iterated several times that there would be a third party. I remember precisely during the course of the joint workshop that was held, Director Cook, you posed the question, and the response by the consultant was saying that TransPro could do this, or there could be another entity that would validate third party. So I don't believe TransPro ever said that they were going to do a survey and then validate their own results, because that would appear to be a conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from any other board members? General Manager, your hand is still up. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call for the vote. I have Director Deschel as the movant and Director Tisdale as the second. I'm going to go through again. Director Bouquet.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
this is on the main motion.
this is on the main motion. Yeah, should I read it again?
Yeah, I think you have Busick and Catlin as the first and second, don't you?
Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
Point of order, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, just for the sake of the record, because there could be confusion. The main motion was in fact Director Busick, seconded by me. Then there were two amendments discussed.
Yeah.
Then the chair did call for another motion. There was already a main motion pending on the floor as originally made, which main motion was subject to two amendments, which amendments were in fact both adopted. The main motion, therefore, as amended, is technically what is before the board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to go for the main motion vote. Ready? Director Bouquet,
Yes.
Broom,
Yes.
Busick,
Yes.
Catlin,
Yes.
Cook,
No.
Davidson,
Yes.
Deschel,
Yes.
Geisinger,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
Sloan,
Yes.
Tisdale,
Yes.
Whitmore,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes, ma'am.
I am a yes. 14 yes, 1 no, being Director Cook. The motion passes. Okay. Well, here we go. That passes. There is no executive session on the agenda. We had it earlier. Is there any old business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, any new business to come before the board this evening? I do have one. I have an item for the new business. Each census, the board must undergo a redistricting process. And I have appointed directors Broom and Whitmore to the redistricting ad hoc committee to lead this effort. Next month at the August 10th Planning Capital Programs and Fast Tracks Committee, Bill Van Meter, Assistant General Manager of the Planning, will provide a more comprehensive update in relation to the redistricting timeline, guidelines, and overall process. Okay, I'm not seeing any other matters coming before the board. I will now
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have one other, which this may have belonged in old business, but I know we passed the land acknowledgement today, and I'm hoping that we could actually read it because why wait? We've been on the land for a while, so if I may, just go ahead and read it out.
Absolutely, please, sir.
The RTD Board of Directors acknowledges that the land on which our buses and trains operate is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to these lands. We honor our Indigenous elders who have traveled, inhabited, and stewarded these mountains, hills, and plains throughout generations. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of inequity of the Native and all historically oppressed peoples, and recognize their current and future contributions in the district as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. It's an appropriate way to end our meeting this evening. Seeing no other matters before us in the board meeting, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, third, fourth, and fifth.
All right, I heard Director Whitmore and a bunch of people, and Director Williams as a second. This meeting is adjourned as of 6:47 p.m. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.